Sup guys, Ross Edgley here, coming to you from Gymshark HQ. Now this is a special podcast today. This is the first one that we're doing from Gymshark HQ, but as promised, I said that I was going to get Olympians, world record holders, military personnel, and fitness legends. And when I said that on the last podcast, I knew I had to deliver. And I feel that I've done that. I feel quietly confident with this guest that I've got in my back pocket. Steve Cook, how are you doing?
Oh, I feel like you just let everyone down with that intro. Like, who is on this? We got Arnold on? Steve who?
No,
man, I'm going to bring you on the road with me as my hype man.
Steve, you have been in the industry years. You're an OG of the industry. And that's why I've been so excited about this podcast, to give the listeners a little bit of a heads up. One thing that I really want to delve into is, as well as your personal background, performing almost like an autopsy on you and your career. But one thing that I want to do is talk about the fitness industry, past, present, and future. You know, the state of the fitness industry. There's been a lot of criticisms, saying that we've kind of lost our way a little bit, looking at Eugene Sandow, father of bodybuilding, an 18th century strongman, and bodybuilding actually only became part of his routine to try and get a little bit of a breather between these incredible feats of strength. Whereas now the argument, with Arnold Schwarzenegger being quite outspoken about it, saying we've kind of lost that a little bit. So that's kind of the format of the show, whilst also talking about how Steve Cook got to where he is, today. And on that note, I mean, this has been hard because we got a taxi over here and I wasn't allowed to ask you any questions.
Yeah, that was tough.
That was hard, right? Just
Yeah.
making small talk.
Yeah.
So I want to start just because rumors are rife in the industry that you might be competing this year. You might be competing next year. What's going on? Where are you at the moment?
Those rumors are that's people ask me that all the time, and I have no desire right now to step back on stage. So for me, the last time I competed was in Hawaii, and I think it was about 2 years ago now. And I stepped on stage and there was no electricity for me. Like, it didn't do anything for me. I love the process. So we briefly touched on the process of getting ready for a show. I love that. I love being on a schedule, being, waking up, getting in your supplements, getting in the cardio. But what I don't love is, with any kind of federation or any kind of organized event, there's always things that you really can't control. And we talked about this too. Since it is so subjective, it's always a little bit difficult for me to, feel good about winning or losing. I think some of the most depressing moments in my life have been like post-win on a show the next 2-3 days, where you're just like, what now? Like, training, like, I'm never going to be as shredded as I am, as I was 3 days ago. I've done nothing but binge eat the last 3 hours, and I'm unhappy as hell right now. And so it's like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to do another show. And so you end up on this vicious cycle. So I'm in a really healthy place right now with my training, with traveling, and just with life in general, that like I'm really excited about every day when I go to the gym doing something new, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's muscle ups, whether it's running, whatever it is. I got to get my back healthy. But besides that, it's exciting right now to train, and I think that that excitement is really there because I'm not competing.
So you'd almost, and when did that realization come? Because what you're describing there is almost this idea of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
So the process is its own reward.
Yeah.
Versus extrinsic motivation, which is essentially, looking good for, the selfie on the beach, or, perhaps, winning that, that trophy, or getting that magazine cover. So when did that realization come about, that you loved the process more than the outcome?
That's a good question. I feel like it's only been recently, I would say the last year, that I've been able to find balance and really train for the love of training, like to push my body, to just be in the gym and like in the moment feel like, I love this. Like, I love this shit. It's been since college. I feel like I maybe since my first bodybuilding show that, I trained a little bit differently than I did after that. I changed up my training after that and did just strictly the bodybuilding. And I kind of just looked at it more as a job then. And now, so it's the last year, it's been really just fun to get back and like, hey, what do you want to do today? Well, let's, we can hit arms, but let's just try this. Let's just try handstand walks. Let's just try different things. And I've always, prided myself on liking to do different things, but it's just really been this last year where I felt like there's no pressure. I can do whatever it is I want. And you know what? If people enjoy it and I put it out there, great. If not, at least I'm happy with it.
I like this. So what does success look like for you now? Because with no goal, with no end target, it was very easy when you were competing. Because success looked like when you stepped off stage, you were handed the silverware. That was success. Yeah. What does it look like for you now? Because with so much that you're doing on YouTube, are you kind of driven by making a great video that sends a great message out into the world? Is that success for you? Do you still want to do you harness any kind of desires to get back into athletics? I know you dabbled in CrossFit.
Yeah.
Like where's your head at, and what does success look like?
That really, I think, is the question that oftentimes I'm like, I need a goal, because it is nice to have extrinsic motivation, like we talked about intrinsic. That extrinsic motivation is going to push you maybe a little bit harder than you can just push yourself naturally. But I think for me right now, gotta get healthy. So traveling the last 7-8 years, being on flights, working out with the mountain, working out with different people. I was that young dumb kid that just was like, oh, I can pick up that Atlas stone without warming up and doing mobility, and my hips are tight from traveling, and now my back is just wrecked. So I think first and foremost, I've trained up my training to where it's less ego driven and more just about, okay, like how is this going to make me feel tomorrow? Is this really benefiting me in the long term, rather than is it just a cool video? Am I doing this just for views? And I think that I would be lying if we said we had things like really planned out. Like when we do YouTube videos, we turn on the camera and it's like, let's just film today's workout. Like yesterday we were at the gym. I was at the hotel and I was like, let's film a hit session what I'm doing this morning. So I think it's more spur of the moment, off the cusp, but it's working right now, and maybe, we'll delve into some more content that's like actually formulated and like really nailed down what we want to do. But right now we're just kind of having fun with what we got. Yeah,
just to go back there on what you said about loving the process as well, because I love, and not many people know, but there was that vlog that you did with Gymshark where you talked about your dad being a strength and conditioning coach as well, making you do push-ups between like commercials and things. Now whether your dad knew that or not, it almost dates back to the Soviet Union era, when they would take athletes, young kids, and they'd look at a young Steve Cook and they'd say, we don't know if he's going to be big, strong, fast, good at endurance. We don't know. He might be good at swimming. We don't know. And there was this idea of general physical preparedness, where it was, we're going to teach them to run, jump, swim, do forward rolls, proprioception, so agility, understand how their body works, that kinesthetic awareness. That's widely sort of praised as building that foundation, that when later they showed any sort of specialization, oh, he's growing tall, maybe he goes into basketball. Oh, he's strong, powerlifting. So whether your dad knew it or not, and I suppose that's my first question, do you think that laid the foundation for everything that you do now? So was your dad aware that he was doing that and equipping you with that neurological efficiency?
Yeah, I think, probably not from like a scientific standpoint that like to that level, but he did know that, like, okay, hey, he'd been around athletes enough to see that a lot of the best athletes were these multi-purpose sports that were dominant, not because first you had to have the competitive drive, so it starts upstairs, but all these athletes that, from skiing to basketball to baseball to swimming. So we did so many different things as kids just to get, we'd go to the track and run. Everything was a competition. I'm one of 7 kids. And I think that early on he saw that I was the only one of my brothers and sisters that naturally just loved to lift, to exercise. So he was more than willing to open up that door and say, hey, let's spend more time. With my brother, it was more basketball driven. Like my brother was a little bit taller, loved to shoot and dribble. For me, it was like, I just wanted to pick up heavy shit and lift it, So it was like, as a kid, I thought that was cool. So, but I remember my dad making me swim, just doing things that I didn't like to do, but trying to be, a well-rounded athlete, because he did see that. He'd always be the dad out there that would bring up stories of like, what's the Greek mythology where the guy throws the bull on his back and each day gets stronger?
Milo.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. He was telling those types of stories as kids. So like, I remember like running a 400 meter and being like 8 years old. I think it was like a minute 46. And he said, that's pretty good. But Bo Jackson would have ran it a minute 43. And of course, my competitive juices were like, oh, I'm going to do it again. So he was good at making it fun while getting the best out of us.
See, and that's so important. Only now we're understanding as coaches to instill that intrinsic motivation. So, from a young age, it seemed like you just, and listening to you now talk, when you say you just loved lifting things up.
Yeah.
You weren't doing it for medals, you weren't competing, you just did it. So that's amazing knowing that sort of was instilled in you from the start. When did that change? Because like you said, you were, and few people know this actually, you went to the very first Olympia physique competition, very, very first one. What was that like? Was that different to what you expected in childhood when you just loved competing? When you went on stage and when the results were called, can you talk about that, how you felt? What was the feeling like?
Yeah. I think that's a time in my life when I look back to that first Olympia, and that was a huge kind of fork in the road that made me decide to go the direction I then went. But it really goes back to, I was training I played college football, and I would train for sports specific stuff, and then I'd go back and do my bodybuilding stuff. I loved working out and being strong, but I also loved looking a certain way too. And I think that started in 6th grade when a girl asked to touch my pecs. I was 12 years old, and this girl asked if she could touch my pecs, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it was like a light bulb went off. Like, hey-oh, girls notice these things. So I think that was the first time, like, I was like, oh, this isn't just cool because I like it. It's also cool because other girls are noticing. So I think that after I got done with playing competitive football in college, I then needed something to kind of fulfill that competitive with myself, really, to see if I could push myself, to change my body and to get on stage. Now, where that first Olympia rocked my world. It was the first time I lost a show.
Okay.
It was the first, I think I'd won, like 6 shows. I had gotten second in one other show, but the first time, it was a big show that I lost. And it really was just like, whoa, what happened? And I remember there's all sorts of political talk and this and that. But what I realized is, I left, my happiness was totally dependent upon what these 4 judges, who are human, who are part of a federation that has all sorts of, different political system, and I was never going to allow myself to ever depend upon that again. And that's when I made the decision, yes, I'll compete, but I'm not going to hang my hat, my self-worth on what 4 judges say, because it's so subjective. And at the time, I still think, obviously, I think to this day, I think they missed the mark, but I was told I couldn't talk about, how, because there was so much backlash from it, and it was like, hey, you don't speak bad about this, and not that I ever would, but there was you need to issue I was told by a judge that's no longer with that federation, that I need to issue a statement saying that I thought it was fair and that I'm happy with the outcome. And I was just blown away at the time, so it kind of turned me off from competing.
Was that done in a friendly way? Was it kind of hand over your shoulder, Steve, can you, we're a young sport.
It was
can you,
you got a future in this, we wouldn't want to, we wouldn't want you causing a stir type thing.
Oh, so wow, that sounds like mafia type stuff.
It was kind of interesting. And again, that judge, I don't know if he was acting on his own, but he's no longer in that federation. So it's probably, I don't know, but it was just one of those things. I was just like, whoa, okay, well, I'm going to stay in my lane, do what I enjoy. If I compete, it'll be because I like the process and I want to go through it. But placings after that point never meant much to me one way or another, because I just saw how jaded things could be.
Yeah. On that note, it's almost one for anyone who's listening, male or female. Would your advice be, please follow in my footsteps with that? There's a lot of young people looking to go and compete.
Yeah.
And would you say, look, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, fall in love with the process. We were talking almost about, Dorian Yates.
Yeah.
They called him the Shadow because he would, train in Birmingham, spit in sawdust gym, love the process, would turn up in the baggiest hoodie, walk on stage, unzip it, boom, won. and then gone. And that's why they called him the Shadow. He loved that during a time when bodybuilding was very much
flamboyant and like, look at me.
Yeah. So would your advice be, firstly, to those competing, to say what you said there, which is just, love the process and don't worry, whatever the outcome, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons at the start?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Competing's not for everyone. There is a very specific person. Now, I love stories when people are like, hey, it's always been a goal of mine to step on stage. I lost, 30 kg and like, I just want to prove this to myself. The ones that I get a little bit like, oh no, I'm watching a train wreck happen is, okay, they do a show and then they want to get their pro card. And they do show after show after show. If I could just get my pro card, I'm going to be happy. Well, they get their pro card. Okay, I'm going to do Olympia. And if I just get that Olympia, I'll be happy. And along the way, maybe they compromise, taking certain things and just push it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more to then where it's no longer about health. It is 100%. You are trying to get that placing, to chase that satisfaction or that outside judge telling you you're good enough, and you're never going to find that in competing. You're never going to be good enough. We're not perfect beings. You're never going to be this perfect specimen. And I think that while bodybuilding is kind of the art of trying to pursue physical perfection, I think inherently it can breed a lot of insecurities because you're always judging yourself, comparing yourself to somebody else. And unless you're, a Mr. Olympia winner, there's always going to be somebody who's better, or what the judges are looking for that day. So I always tell people, if you love training, and the minute you do a show, you're going to find out real soon if it adds value to your life or if it doesn't. If it's not adding value, if you don't like it, there's some people that can do show after show after show, and they just love it. They can keep balance in their life. They can have healthy relationships. There's other people that eating disorders, troubled relationships, they can't balance it. And I think that so many people I've seen come through the industry, and myself included. Like, I competed for a year solid, and at the end of that year, I didn't know how to eat normal. I didn't know how to eat without like, oh, look at the clock, 3 hours, time for tilapia chicken and asparagus, or tilapia rice and asparagus. And I think that there's so many people that go through that and then end up with this eating disorders. And, you see it all the time on Instagram, girls talking about their experience with competing. And it seems like girls are more open about it than guys are, because guys can go through this binge eating process and it's like, oh, I'm bulking, bro. It's like, yeah, oh, no. Like, I remember getting done with a muscle and fitness shoot and walking around the streets of Santa Monica and eating everything. Like, I couldn't stop. Like it was just like I was full, my belly couldn't handle it anymore, but my mouth was just needing more food. So I would chew things up and spit it out because it was so unhealthy. Got to the point where I tried to make myself throw up. To this day, I've never thrown up, and I've tried to make myself throw up. It's a very weird fact that I've never actually told anyone. But very interesting. I was so full, I tried to make myself throw up and just couldn't do it. But just an awful feeling. So
and that's it. I think what you're touching upon there and stuff, and I love that you've been so honest about that, because it is. I've never competed myself, but friends of mine have, and you see that, and you're so right that you can apply terminology to it. I'm bulking, I'm cutting, and it's just like you can apply terminology, but ultimately we might be dancing with the parameters of muscle dysmorphia, and it's just like, to be so honest, about that. I think it's amazing to try and get people to realize that. That even heroes who we hold up, like Winston Churchill, to use a British example, everyone's like Winston Churchill, but he was a troubled hero, and I think it's everyone. We're human at the end of the day. We're human, and to touch upon that, do you think that's kind of where the industry might be going? Like, now, if you look at, you must have heard this, as if you now make a G.I. Joe doll life size, he's got like 40-inch arms, compared to the other one. In fact, can we bring that up actually? Like, if we just put like G.I. Joe doll from like the old versus the new, and you'll be able to see. So what do you think this is actually going to be doing to... It's
like the male equivalent of a Barbie doll.
This is exactly it, but we don't speak about this. To look at this now, so that's the old school guy, great facial hair.
Wow, that beard. Is that beard natural? That's what I'm wondering right there.
Well, this is it. So he's from that? So that's 1970s G.I. Joe.
He's flexible still. He's functional. Okay.
He might even be doing some yoga there. So right. So and then now you've got to think as a kid, growing up, and even when you look at like certain.
Oh yeah. That
is that one there?
Go up and then left. The guy in the suit right there. Yeah. That's like Serge Nubret, pretty much. That is like tiny little waist, or you can go back to the guy with the tank top.
And even bigger is that if you actually search Venom or Spike. Okay, there you go. Okay. G.I. Joe Britannia.
Arnold-esque commando. Like.
Wow. And this is the same. Even searching, if you search like Venom cartoon, and that's kind of just muscle fibers in place. Look at this dude. So what is going to happen, to kids growing up? What do you think? And do you think there's a certain responsibility on companies like Marvel and people like that? Do you think they need to be? That is not. He's having more than Weetabix for breakfast.
That's a lot of protein.
That's a lot of protein.
Yeah, it's funny. Like growing up, me and you, I was like, it was Van Damme, it was Arnold. Even Apollo Creed in the Rockies, Stallone, all amazing physiques, and those are the guys I looked up to. Nowadays, with CGI, you got characters like Venom that are just overboard. Like Apollo Creed there. Look at him. Like that is an aesthetic human being. Like, but he's not.
He's not obscene.
Yeah, he's not obscene.
It's still aesthetic. So,
Jean-Claude Van Damme would be the same thing. Ivan Drago, like major macho man, and those are the guys that's probably where I originally got like, oh, I want to look like that. I want to look like the superhero. I don't think we, the actors nowadays, Chris Hemsworth got pretty big for Thor. I'd put him in that category. The Rock. So you still have some people that are like that, but then you can go over the top with it, where we start getting more of like the CGI effects and things like that. But I definitely think, I see it as the issue I see right now is with Instagram. You have so many, I was just given, I just got an email with a kid that was writing a report in college about do the effects of steroids outweigh the benefits of like social media exposure by taking them, like what it does for your physique.
How old was he?
This kid's in college.
Wow. Okay.
But he's not talking about himself taking steroids and steroids.
No.
He's talking about, okay, in the world we live in, like, can you put a price tag on your health or what? And it's kind of getting back to that, like how are you going to push that envelope? If you're doing a show, like how far do you go? What are you putting in your body? And I think that we're living in this era that like there's so, and the girl equivalent of it is how much skin are you going to show? Like, what kind of booty workouts are you doing? What are you wearing? Not just workouts, but being on the thong in a beach. Like, what are we doing for likes? Like, what is it? And should companies say, okay, at the risk of maybe not getting as many eyeballs, we need to scale it back because we're promoting the wrong things here. And I think news outlets right now too, it's like clickbait on news organizations. They just want the most clicks because news is free. So the way they get the news out there is they need advertising, they need eyeballs. So it becomes like, these YouTube clickbait titles on major news sources. So I just think we have, as consumers out there of so much content, we need to ask ourselves, like, what are these images doing to us? What is this article doing? Like, because it does have an effect on us. Now, what those are long term, yet to be seen.
To go off on a slight tangent on that, though, do you think we're seeing a change now? Certainly with, they call them digital natives. So those, kids growing up who have born into Instagram, Facebook, and they get that. And podcasts, they understand it. Whereas we're almost digital immigrants in that, there was a period where we didn't understand it and we've now come to adopt it.
Digital immigrants. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. It's not mine, but you use it. But do you think that now, for instance, with a lot of advice and information for me, I'll go straight to podcasts because I know that's not been vetted. It's quite raw, exactly like we're talking now. People listening will say, wow, that's not been edited. No one's telling them what to say. So do you think that there is that change now, that with this happening? A great example, when I was growing up, I played water polo. I entered into the senior game, I was just getting beaten up because I was like so small. So they said, you need to bulk up. And I was like, bulk up, okay. And I remember buying like Flex magazine. That was the only thing that I had.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, he looks like he's bulked up. You know, and I'm reading it going,
Ronnie Coleman, all right, there we go.
It's honest, yeah. And I was there, bench press.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and that's what I was learning from. Now you go straight to the source. So there'll be people listening saying, oh, do you know what? I want to look like Steve Cook. So I follow Steve Cook. I don't have to buy a magazine. So do you think that's changing? And as a result, you almost have a real sort of social responsibility on your hands to do that. Exactly what you just said there, where you're saying, oh, I know that this might get more likes, but I feel sort of morally obliged.
Yep.
Do you feel that?
I go back and forth because you're at that, we're conditioned to put out like what makes us feel good. And what makes us feel good is when everyone's like, oh, you look great, 100,000 likes on this. And I'm thinking in my head, I must be doing great, when really quite the opposite is true. Sometimes the things that don't get talked about enough, or that should be more of the focus. Because anyone, then because we live in such a visual world, anyone that has, you know, the best abs, well, they're the authority on training abs. That's not true. That's just, you know, scientifically, there's the reason we have, you know, peer-reviewed journal articles, and is because we demand a higher standard from those things. But there's so much content out there. As a consumer, it's just our responsibility to sift through what's good and what's not. So I think I'm definitely to blame. A lot of the times when the content I put out, I'm like, you know, I probably could have done better with this, but I do want to be more conscientious of the content we put out. And I think as I get older, it's kind of less about, okay, let's delve more into this topic, or let's, you know, it's difficult. There's always that struggle.
Well, we were talking about that. Do you think it's going to implode almost as well? That like there was a time when we just wanted quick abs. Yeah. On Instagram, we were like, you got 15 seconds to tell me how to get quick abs. Now, though, people want longer form. Some of your best YouTube videos, you know, are long. Yeah. You know, and there's things where people want more knowledge now. Do you think? So do you think it's coming full circle? Do you think the girls showing their bum, you know, it's kind of like, oh no, we want to look at more Alex Honnold and how he freestyled. We want to talk mental health. Do you think that's happening? Yeah. We're becoming numb to that?
For sure. I do think that there's now this desire for deeper content, the content that's going to have more of a lasting effect rather than the quick gratification. Like, you know, we all know scrolling on Instagram, seeing, you know, that some girl's bum popping up, like, you know, that used to be a novelty. Like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, look at this girl. She's doing squats in a thong. Now we see it a million times, and it's like, I need something more. Like, that doesn't have the same effect. So I think it's good. You know, I think that to your point about Alex Honnold, like seeing something like that, that is so foreign. Like, that's so crazy. Are we going to always have to push the envelope more and more and more? I think at the same time, what you're talking about, getting more into educational stuff, that's where it's really cool. I think people aren't afraid to talk about anything now. Like, we live in this day and age that there's so much that is just, you know, out there. It's just more about sifting through that other stuff that might not be as good.
Okay. And moving forward, if whether you decide to compete or not, it doesn't matter, but you're saying that, you know, aesthetics and a love of the process, that's what you're driven by. What does the best Steve Cook look like in your opinion? Are you happy with where you're at now? Do you want to be bigger? We were talking earlier when you were 20 and you were 115 kilos?
That's about the heaviest I ever got. It was about 115 kilos. Yeah.
Large.
Yeah.
How did you feel at that? And then you mentioned when you basically cut down from that. Correct me if I'm wrong. After you lost that weight, so you lost 15 kilos, which is a weighted vest. Yeah. You were doing 42 strict pull-ups.
42, yeah. So I did the muscle and fitness male model search. We could actually pull that up. The muscle and fitness, this is the bodybuilding.com's fit body contest. Steve Cook, bodybuilding.com, fit body.
So what we're about to see
pink shorts.
This is post, so you were 115, and then you cut down to what we're about to see. And what were you here?
So go, say that again?
And what were you, so you were 115, and then there was, I mean, this, and worth noting, you were playing American football at the time, right? So you just
Yes.
needed...
There's a picture of me playing American football there.
Oh, can we get the American football one as well?
yeah,
I want to
go.
see what... Oh, so this is you cut down from 115.
Yes. So I'm about... I'm up 202 pounds here.
And how tall as well, though?
So 6'1".
6'1".
You go up a little bit, you can see that football photo right there, that switch, that change. So I was...
Oh, well, okay.
I was beefy.
Wow.
Yeah, I was, and I remember dressing up as a Chippendale.
Is that your...
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
That looks like your bigger brother.
I know. Yeah. I'm about to do the haka there. We did the haka before the game. So,
that's immense.
Yeah, it was. But again, I thought I was like lean too. Like we were talking a little bit about like, you know, I had this, I didn't really know what lean was until I got ready for a show, but like, cause you know, you get a lot of muscle when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, like all you want to do is get big.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, important to add that. That's a great time in your life to add muscle, but I just wanted to get big and big and bigger and bigger. I remember showing up to like a Halloween and being a Chippendale in college, and I look back and I was pudgy. It's like, what the hell was I thinking? But I also probably think that's some body dysmorphic disorder going on there in my head. But yeah.
And I think that's true, though. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I'm taking from this podcast is, yeah, let's be so honest. Like, I think, you know, even with, you know, anorexia and body dysmorphia, people say it's kind of like, you know, black and white, you know, it's polar. It's like, it's not. Everyone will have elements. And, you know, it's only now we're understanding, like, human psychology is so complex.
Yeah.
But I think it's those people dating back to the ancient Greeks, you know, they were trying to understand it. And the ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius was, you know, keeping a diary, and Meditations now are sold, you know, millions of copies around the world. He didn't want to write a best-selling book. It was his diary. He was trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
Everything that you're talking about, Plato, exactly the same. You know, Plato influenced Western philosophy as we know it today, but Plato...
The original influencer.
Yeah, the original. But he was. I mean, he understood. And even a gymnasium back in the day, a gymnasium was a place in ancient Greek where they would wrestle and do calisthenics, but equally talk about intellectual pursuits.
Yeah.
You know, this is almost a gymnasium that we're doing, you know, right now. So you're absolutely right that I think so often you need to just look at yourself and honestly address, where am I at? Am I happy? Does this have elements of muscle dysmorphia? Do I need to be bigger? Am I fit for purpose? So having said this, to go back to this, at 115, you felt strong, you felt good. Would you ever be back 115?
No.
Do you feel you've done that?
I would never want to go back there. I did it because I was playing American football, and I thought as a linebacker, you know, I was looking at guys like Ray Lewis, who were 250, guys that had... I just didn't have... I don't think the bone structure, or like, you know, I've to get to 240 pounds for me, I was so tight. I could barely... You know, my lateral movement wasn't great. So I would have been a better athlete. I would have been a better football player if I would have been 220, 215 pounds. Being able to move, being agile. Speed's the name of the game now. And I think that, you know, I didn't have that wherewithal to understand that at the time. It was like, just be big and hit people as hard as you can, run as fast as you can. And so I would have changed things up, but it served its purpose. I think, you know, going from 240 down to 200 pounds, for a show, like I had a lot of muscle at 240 pounds, and like it was nice to you know, when I stripped off a lot of that body fat, and you know, inherently you're going to lose some muscle too when you're dropping weight, but I still had a lot of muscle left.
Wow. To go back to the training as well, because this is the thing that I often say that you know, there are many ways to get fitter, stronger, leaner, quicker. Don't discriminate against any or favor one. As soon as you do, you close your mind and limit your potential. And it seems with you've jumped from a lot of different sports. You've done obstacle races at a big guy. You've also been powerlifting, bodybuilding. You dabbled in CrossFit as well. I suppose in terms of anybody trying to manipulate their physiology, want to change their body composition, the way that you have arrived today doesn't quite make sense, you know, in that it was this kind of like Soviet Union, young Steve Cook being trained by your dad. Then you were there, you know, 115 kilos, which, you know, many people wouldn't advocate, but you know what? Your ligaments would have got so strong carrying that around. So then when you actually cut and you were doing 42 strict muscle, you wouldn't ever say to an athlete, right, we're going to make you 115 kilos, then we're going to strip you back, you know, so it doesn't make, you know, sense. but it's worked.
But it worked.
It's worked. And that's the weird way. So on that journey, is there anything that you would have done differently? Or are you just sort of sitting here thinking, like the ancient Stoics, amori fati, where they are lovers of fate, and they believe whatever you did, you had to go through, the Halloween costume where you're like, so is there anything that you would have done differently? You mentioned your back, but, do you feel that you had to do that? You've got to push the limits to know where they are. Would you have done anything different?
I definitely, the only thing I would have done different, because I kind of am a big believer of everything that we do is inherently us in terms of now I am who I am because of all of those different things. The back, I definitely would advocate more mobility, stretching, doing all of that stuff to really prehab, because there's nothing worse than being somebody who loves to move, who really just genuinely loves to push their body, and then all of a sudden you can't. That, at the end of the day, to me, is the only thing that if I could go back and do something different, would be to make sure, as tight of hips as I have, to really do tons of foam rolling, the mobility stuff. One of my legs is a little bit longer. All of these things that I needed to spend, all it meant is I needed to spend extra time doing the things that matter, the tiny little detail stuff that people don't like doing. It's easy to go in and lift weights. I tell that all the time. It's harder to go in and stretch and foam roll and sit in a couch stretch or a pigeon. Those aren't fun things for me. So I naturally neglected those things, and that's the only thing I would change, because if you have a body, you're an athlete. You're moving, you can do all of those things. The minute you can't move, then it's depression sets in, and all of these things that just suck start taking hold. Yeah.
To wrap up, one other thing that I want to quiz you on is people don't quite understand that they often see the end result, and they don't understand what went before it. There's some amazing stories where people talk about when you were traveling the world, you were a lot of people say this, one of the hardest working guys in the industry, that when you were vlogging, before it was even called vlogging, you mentioned, there was one of your videos, people would look at you going, why is he talking to the camera? Did you, I suppose my first question is, did you have the foresight to know that YouTube was going to be big, that vlogging was going to be a thing, that you could make a living from this? Did you have the foresight, or did you realize what you were doing when you were walking around talking to a camera?
I would love to say it. I knew. No, I didn't. At the time, I've been kind of, I think, right place at the right time, but also, all got to thank my dad for, setting that foundation. But also, it's just about passion. Where there's passion for something, I think that there's going to be a path that you can create. If you're passionate about something, chances are someone else is equally passionate about that. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. Like, to think that we're all, these perfectly unique snowflakes, it's a great thought. But I think, there's somebody out there that has the same passion as you for something. Now, there's not people that are swimming around the UK, so you take your passion and you apply it with just some crazy work ethic, and I think that's what sets people apart. But there's passion out there, and so for me, like YouTube, I saw, I had a girlfriend whose older brother did it, and I saw he had some wild success, and I saw an industry like the fitness industry where there was very limited people doing it. I was the first person at an expo walking around vlogging myself. I think there was me and Scott Herman and like six-pack abs, Mike Chang. Wow. Those were like the fitness YouTubers, I think, at the time.
An OG.
That was like, those two guys I think were around before me, but I can remember.
And how long ago was that, and what expo was it, by the way?
It would have been 2011, 2012. That I would have been just starting. I actually had to start a set.
Amazing.
The YouTube I have now was my second YouTube, because I started my YouTube and then went away from it, forgot the password, and then had to start.
Oh no! So if we were to search your first video, would it be legitimately your first video, or can we see like some of the old?
I think my first video is me dancing in Santa Monica with some bums.
Can we get that off?
That is and again, it has nothing to do with fitness. It was just me.
Oh wow! Look how old school that is.
Yeah. Do Steve Cook.
So that was 6 years ago, is that? 8
years? So this is my second YouTube channel we're looking at now.
So there was older ones than this that are lost in the archives.
Yeah, if you type in like Steve Cook, Santa Monica dancing, Let's see.
So you were doing this not really. I mean, this would have been void of any YouTube strategy.
That's it right there. Oh man.
Yeah,
no, this is no YouTube strategy at all.
No.
This is like, hey.
So this is intrinsic
You-
because you wouldn't dance. Oh, this is amazing.
This is Steve Cook, health, physical, mental, spiritual, and I still love that tagline. But
that guy is absolutely rocking out.
yeah, just some homeless people in California, and here I am, kind of douchebag Steve, got my beanie on.
How old are you at this point?
I don't know, early 20s, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go out there and dance with them. So
Oh, I love that.
yeah, we're getting.
What is he
down.
doing there?
I don't know, man. So this is just having fun, and just it's cringy, but
It's not. That is intrinsic motivation. That is a love of the process. Oh, God bless you.
oh man, I think that's my first YouTube video ever. So that's the first one I ever filmed.
And obviously at this point you are.
What is that filmed with, a potato? Like that thing is so bad.
So at this point, I think this illustrates the point. At this point, you didn't know where it was going to go.
No.
But for me, this is one thing. Not just this now sort of transcends. Athletic sport YouTube in many ways. We're looking at like Steve Jobs gave an amazing talk. I think it was at Harvard. I can't remember. And they said, Steve, what advice would you give a younger Steve Jobs? And he looked them dead in the eye and he said, I wouldn't tell them anything, because if they knew the amount of work that was involved, they wouldn't do it. Looking at the young Steve Cook there, just busting out a move, would you have told him anything different? Or would you say just, you know what, enjoy the ride, it's going to be crazy?
I would have just said, stretch more. That's all I would have said. Stretch more. I'm not giving you anything
Back
else.
to the Future, you would have just gone over it. Okay.
That's it. Again, because that's the only physical pain.
Right.
That, all the emotional pain, all those other things that you go through, that is super important. The physical pain, I think, you can limit the amount, but...
And so from that video there and to where you are today, are you able to almost quantify for everybody listening just the work that you've put in? Often just like unpaid hours, when you were just, no one was paying you to do this, it wasn't a job, nothing existed, there wasn't even a thing as a content creator.
Right.
That physique competition, they didn't exist at this point. Is it true as well? I heard a story that you were even waiting tables as well whilst competing, training almost like a professional athlete while uploading videos, while waiting tables, so you could actually supplement that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. So I had my biology. I was an integrated study biology, psychology, and I was looking at going into chiropractics. I was looking at a few different things, but I had just competed and just got a sponsorship with bodybuilding.com and Optimum Nutrition. And I remember shooting with a photographer, probably the first time I was ever in LA, first photo shoot, professional photo shoot I ever did. And he said, there's really no money in the fitness industry. Like, you really can't, unless you're a big time bodybuilder, there's nothing really here for people. So what do you want to do? And I just remember thinking, well, I'm passionate about this. Like, social media, Facebook was around, Instagram wasn't quite there yet, YouTube was there, and I was just like, you could just feel, this, passion was for educating, and I just, instead of listening to him, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to work as a waiter. I'm going to tell Optimum Nutrition, use me as much as possible. Send me around the world. They were paying me $500 a month at the time, plus supplements. And I was just saying though, hey, you're sending me to Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, go. I would go to these expos and I would meet people, and I think that's probably where the most passion out of all of this last 7 years in journey, meeting people around the world, and everyone, being a unique person, having unique stories. A lot of the times the stories are the same, whether it's getting over relationships is why you started the gym, but just connecting with people. I think that's probably been my looking back, the greatest experience, the things that I've got to go through is sharing moments with people at expos, people crying, breaking down, talking about the pain, the struggle that they've gone through, and just feeling that human connection. Because that is really what I think at the end of the day we all just kind of yearn for, is that human connection. And for me, that's been through fitness, through bodybuilding. And I think that the minute people lose sight of human connection. And I think we definitely are in this day and age. There's less human connection. But again, getting back to like Alex Honnold and seeing that kind of stuff, that you start looking at the psychology of it. And it's human connection. You're like, how does he do that? Like, how does he, So I think there's that. It's like that feeling the need just to be a part of something.
Yeah, with I suppose a work ethic, like we talked about. Everyone always says training is the realization of one's genetic potential. So certainly with your brother playing basketball, those genetics would have laid dormant had you not have realized them. How much would you say it's a nature versus nurture with you?
Well, like with anything, whether it's intellect, physical attributes, we have a spectrum. I would never be the fastest man in the world. I could train harder than Usain Bolt ever trained. I do not have the potential, the genetic makeup to run the 100 meters in 9.6 some seconds. I just don't have that. So I think it's important that, we look at, what we're genetically, and then at the same time, don't let that stop you from doing what you're passionate about. Like if I'm really passionate about sprinting, I should still go out and do that, but do it for yourself. Like there's only one Mr. Olympia in bodybuilding every year. That doesn't stop people from going to the gym because there's some benefits from that. But I definitely think that it's an equal genetics versus, your environment and your passion for things. And a lot of times we just are naturally pushed in that direction of, okay, you're kind of predisposed to this. There's no coincidence that if you meet a 7-footer in the United States, there's a 1 in 7 chance that he's in the NBA.
Wow, they're the stats.
Yes.
Oh.
So that's if you meet somebody who's 7-footer over in the U.S., there's a chance 1 in 7 that he is. If it's a guy,
that's
is.
Incredible.
I don't think there's too many girls walking around over 7 foot, but
that is
that he's in the NBA. So again, we kind of go and we kind of get morphed into these things, but I think that there's more to it.
Yeah. Okay. In summary, final question: that when all is said and done, and you are training at the gymnasium up in the sky, what do you hope your legacy will be? It kind of goes back to what success looks like for you, but what do you want your legacy to the world to be? Do you think it will be leaving an imprint right now on the fitness industry, where we're trying to get back to a little bit of functionality, like Eugene Sandow and the fire of bodybuilding? Would you like to see us go down more of the pursuit of the golden ratio and understanding aesthetics like the ancient Greece? Do you think it's got nothing to do with that? Is something else kind of, are you sitting there thinking, success looks a little bit different? Maybe the fitness industry. Would you like to talk about mental health? Because only speaking to you today, you speak so eloquently on it with real experience. What do you think? Would you just like to? What area would you like to leave the world a better place than when you found it?
That's a great question. I feel for me, getting back to that connection, that I'm going to say, connection with people is at the core, the most human trait that we have, is to be able to, look at somebody else and empathize, sympathize with that person, and to draw some life experience that you've shared with them. I think that is most important for me. To try to just, I haven't thought much about legacy, only because that's like, when someone messages me and says, Steve, I want to be a social media influencer. And my response is always the same, is you don't set out to be a social media influencer. If you're doing that, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So I'm not necessarily setting out, I never think about legacy, because I think that's left for people like Michael Jordan and people that are really doing cool things. For me, it's like I want to try to you have to have your passion. If you can make your passion your career and make money off of it and support a family, that's great. But also going above that, like what makes you tick at the end of the day? What makes you, and for a long time in my life, it was looking at, when I was early 20s, it was about, that ratio, the aesthetics. But life has this tendency, you move, it's fluid, and you push so hard in one direction, and all of a sudden life pushes back. When I was doing show after show after show, all of a sudden my body was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I could not stay on, I couldn't eat tilapia and chicken anymore. I was working at a restaurant, traveling for Optimum Nutrition, trying to prep for shows, in the back stuffing my face, binge eating. So I was like, wait a minute, this isn't normal. This isn't healthy. What are we doing? We have to kind of reroute here. We have to go a different direction. But I think the one constant thing, whether it's YouTube, whether it's traveling the world, is human interaction, human connection. If we can have that, if we can experience that, that to me is going to be something that would mean a lot. People be like, you know what, I met that guy, and made me feel better about where I'm at in life.
You say that about, but, and I know I said that was the final question, but I've got one more. But when you talk about, I go back to Marcus Aurelius and meditations, and Seneca and Epictetus, all of these guys, the ancient Stoics, they were writing diaries. Mm-hmm. That's what they were doing. They weren't trying to write best-selling books. They were just trying to make sense of the world. Plato, Aristotle, all of them were. In some ways, that is what you're doing. You're not writing them, you're vlogging them. And in a world where they were trying to make sense of the world back then, you're now trying to make sense of the world now, saying, okay, wow, social media, this is a new thing. So you're now trying to make sense of that. Now, talking about connections, it's only just now that we're understanding behavioral science. Mm-hmm. So I always talk about International Journal of Obesity 2008, and they wanted to look at the best diet for fat loss. And they were looking at, everyone was on tenterhooks. They were like, it's got to be South Beach diet, keto, what is it, Atkins? Everyone was, and they said, and I quote, they said, we found, and everyone was listening, they were like, what? And they said that weight loss was highest in those most adherent. And they said, what do you mean? And they said, the diet doesn't matter, sticking to it does. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, that's what you've realized, the hard way, granted, but you've now realized that. So is there a part of you that actually wants to maybe start to document that as well? Do you feel that you've already done that? To think of the amount of diets, the amount of protocols that you've actually trialed throughout the years. Again, you wouldn't recommend it as a study. If I was at Loughborough University and I said, I wanted to do a study, and then they'll be like, great, okay, let us know what resources you need. And I'll be like, I need one guy, I need 10 years, I'm going to bulk him up to 115 kilos, I'm going to make him eat his rice and his, do you know what I mean? And then he's going to get bored of that. And at the point when he's bored and we explore intrinsic motivation, we're going to see what else, it wouldn't make any sense. So do you feel that in some ways you've turned yourself inadvertently, and whether it was, again, because of how your dad understood it, into a human guinea pig, but you have been exposed to the fitness industry in a way that nobody else has, and you've been exposed to it in a way that it's changed. Way back in the day, 10 years ago, I remember at Loughborough University, if I walked over to a guy in the gym and he was well built, I'd say, wow, you're a big guy, what do you do? And they'll be like, oh, rugby player, I'm a powerlifter. Now, and it's only just happened in the last 10 years. You can go up to someone and say, oh, wow, big guy, what do you train for? And again, this isn't a dig at all, but, sometimes people will say, I'm training for a music festival. I'm training for Glastonbury. I'm like, but you look phenomenal. And you're so strong.
That extrinsic motivation is powerful.
Exactly. So there's nothing wrong with that. They're pursuing the golden ratio and they're looking at, the aesthetics and how Leonardo da Vinci kind of looks. But do you think that's something that you'd like to, a book or another vlog or a film, like the pursuit of aesthetics? Is there something, because you're in a really unique position, I feel, to actually comment on that? You've become, like I said, inadvertently, whether you know it or not, almost an expert in muscle dysmorphia, the way that the fitness industry, social media, behavioral science. Would that interest you?
It would. I think being the psychology background, and I think starting off bringing it more into the vlogs on YouTube, talking more about, what that all, because really, when you go through it, you don't really like talking about it. At the time, you would have never, I was trying to be this dude that seemed perfect. Perfect abs. I can stay on like chicken, fish, tilapia. Like, I just remember like feeling like I was going to I was like, oh, this isn't for me. The fitness industry isn't for me because I can't stick to my diet. I can't eat just my 6 meals of tilapia. And all of a sudden it's like, no, like people need to talk about, what it is that they're going through. People need to talk about how, okay, I tried this and I learned, and again, at its core, it's just you are the guinea pig, like you said. You're the scientific study that, okay, for me personally, I can push it this far. Once I push further than that, my natural tendencies or my body wants to push back. Mentally, I can't push harder than that, or otherwise I just break down. So I think it's about finding that sweet spot. But you only can find that sweet spot later on in life by pushing to those extremes early on. And that's where we all have, like you said, with the diet, the one you adhere to. We all have a different average, a different medium, a different happy place that we really should be striving to live with, and that's different with everyone.
Do you think that will change? I suppose on that note, because the whole purpose of this podcast was to talk about the future of the industry. Do you think it will implode? Do you think now that we're looking to guys like, to use an MMA example, Daniel Cormier, current UFC heavyweight champion, he's 5'11".
Yeah.
And his body doesn't look like, Brock Lesnar, Alistair Overeem, but he's phenomenal. In fact, if we can just bring up actually Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, he's a little bowling ball.
Exactly, but just incredible. Do you think? Oh, I love that picture. Yeah. You couldn't have picked. Yeah. But do you think? I love how the UFC heavyweight champ, they call him the baddest man on the planet.
Yeah.
And then after he won and beat Stipe, he walked out with his kids doing a little dance, and they said the daddest man on the planet. I was like, amazing. Yeah. But do you think with people like Daniel Cormier, with you being so outspoken now and being so honest, really, do you think that the fitness industry, do you think it has a future in physique? Do you think it might get to the point where when people are pursuing such low body fats, and looking at female athletes with, menstrual cycle stopping, do you think it's in danger of becoming almost eating itself, almost cannibalizing itself? And do you think the same with MMA, how they realized with weight cutting practices, they were like, wow, we can't have guys constantly getting on the scales dehydrated. We need to do something, otherwise we're going to be in real trouble. Do you think the same is going to happen with the fitness industry?
I think what you'll have is always have outliers that want to be extremely freaky and lean. And you'll have, I think, if from history we learn anything, that history repeats itself. So we will go, it's a part of the cycle of everything, that things come and go out of trends. I think low carb diets have been sold 100 different ways over the last 10 years, Atkins and keto and all of these different things. So things, people forget, like the same thing is packaged and resold and resold and resold. So I think you're always going to have I call it the bad, but people that are just focused on only the aesthetics, and you're always going to have that. But I think what we now have is access to so much more information, so you can then decide, and that's really where the power lies. If you are choosing to do that, then at least when I first started in the fitness industry, I thought I had to eat 6 meals a day of chicken and rice. Then there was if it fits your macros, and now for me, I kind of like do this hybrid thing. We were talking about it at breakfast, like, I don't really worry about what I eat. It's more about portion control. And there are some days that I'm probably only getting 160 grams of protein, but there's other days that I'm getting 280. So I've learned that, like, the law of averages, it just kind of, if you over time just little by little chip away at something, that is going to provide, or it's just going to pay off in the long run. So I think we're always going to have people that want to push the envelope in competition, because you always want to find how far you can push it before it backfires on you. So guys cutting weight in the MMA, like we know so much more about it. We know it's not healthy, but guys still feel like, okay, if I can just push a little bit more and fight at this weight class. But the nice thing is knowledge is power, and we have the knowledge now to make those decisions.
I suppose because of social media, it can be a tool, for good or evil. Yes, it could eat itself with these, like, people trying to pursue likes, or like you just said, back in the day when you bought certain magazines and you looked on the cover, you had no idea how they got there. Now you can follow that person and go, oh wow, they suffer from eating rice or broccoli. So now, so what you're saying, I suppose the fate of the industry, and almost kind of human psychological welfare as well, is going to be based on how much we lift the lid on social media. Yes. And I suppose me wanting to believe in humanity, I'm like, I hope we start to follow people like yourself who are going to so openly talk about that. And whether it's now, whether you vlog about it, whether you write a book, I would buy that. I'll pre-order it now. If you wrote a book all around behavioral science, muscle dysmorphia, I would buy that. So that's honestly, Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for being so honest and kind of just teaching me a lot on this as well.
Thank you.
I should have taken notes.
No. I want to do one and talk about you, because I feel like we were going to talk a lot more about you and everything that you've done, because If we want to use a scientific study, we need to look no further than yourself, because you do some amazing things.
No, I'm just good at floating. I float and eat. That's what I do.
I float and eat.
Guys, that was the very first podcast from Gymshark HQ. Steve Cook was every much a legend as I thought it would be. Steve, mate, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Boom.